Hello, 80s receiving teachers and students. Thank you. Sit down. Class, in our previous lesson, we looked at parts of a circle. I believe most of us have drawn a circle and named the parts of the circle. And today, we are going to try to name some of the parts of the circle that we have already gone through in our previous lesson. 80s and receiving students, on the screen I have a circle, diagram of a circle. Now, class, the boundary of a circle is known as the what? It's known as the circumference. Very good. And what about the chord that passes through the center? What is the name given? Diameter. Very good. The chord that passes through the center is known as the diameter. Very good. Now, in today's lesson, our lesson topic is on measuring circumference and diameter. We are going to measure those parts of a circle that we all know, the circumference and the diameter. 80s and receiving students, up in front on the table, I've got some objects. The first one is a can, tin can, okay? And the second one is a tin lid, and the other two, a bottle and a cup. Okay. Finally, in my pocket, I've got some coins. Okay? Some coins. Now, 80s and receiving students, the objects which I showed you are some of the examples of circular objects and cylindrical objects. Okay? Circular objects are the tin can, the lid of a tin and a coin, a lid of a tin and a coin, and cylindrical objects are the can and the bottle, and also the cup as well. Is that clear? Okay, good. Now, 80s and receiving students, we said our topic is measuring the circumference and diameter. Who would like to tell us how can we measure the circumference of this cup here? How could we measure it? Can somebody tell us how can we measure the circumference? We all know that the circumference is the boundary of a circle. Okay? Who can tell us how can we measure the circumference of the circle? Who would like to guess? Anybody would like to try? Explain to us how you can measure the circumference of a cup or cylindrical object. Anyone? Okay, our friend would like to try, so we'll hear from her. Can you show us as well? You describe how you can measure the circumference.
By By measuring it with a tape measure.
Tape measure. How can you show us? You can use that can on your table and Do you have a tape measure? No. So if you don't have a tape measure, how can you measure the can there? Is there any ways you can measure it? No. Okay, she's saying that using a tape measure. What about the others? Okay, Daniel. Sorry, Danny. Eddie.
By using the strip of paper.
Can you show us how you can measure the circumference by using the strip of paper? You can use a can there.
Can, please.
Get a strip of paper as well. You said using a strip of paper.
Place a strip of paper around the circumference. Mark the starting point and where you stop, and you will mark it and place it on a ruler. There you will find your circumference.
Can you show us clearly, slowly, and we can see? Ladies and receiving students, let's see how Eddie can measure the circumference of the can there. Eddie, you explain to us how you can measure the circumference.
Place a strip of paper on a cylindrical object and wrap it around. Stop where the edge of the first paper. Get a barrel. Mark it and then measure it. Use the ruler to measure. Measure the mark. The circumference of can is 21 centimeters.
Okay, very good. Let's give him 2 big claps. He has shown us something on how we can measure the circumference of a cylindrical object. Now, 80s and receiving students, what about a circular object? How can we measure the diameter of a circular object? A circular object, diameter of a circular object, like this tin lid here, or a coin. How can we measure the diameter? Remember, the diameter is the chord passing through the center of the circle. This group here, would you like to try? Can you tell us how you can measure the diameter of the circular object, like this tin can or the coin?
By rolling the coin along a ruler.
Okay, can you show us what do you mean by rolling the coin along the ruler? Wait. Dearest, watching. So, with that 22 a coin, what is the diameter then? If you are saying rolling the coin along the ruler. Remember, we are finding the diameter. Okay? Dearest, let's see what our friend is doing. Okay, can you tell the class how you have found the diameter? Okay.
First, you put the point on the coin and then you roll it along the ruler.
Roll it along the ruler.
And then you roll the coin till you come and stop on the starting point again, and then you'll find the diameter. So the diameter of the coin is more than 3 diameters. The circumference of the coin is more than 3 diameters.
Okay. So when you're rolling the coin, can you show me all the coin? Can you show me where the diameter is? You show the camera. Okay. Is this the diameter or the boundary around the coin is the diameter? The boundary around the coin. 87% students, our friend is saying the boundary around the coin is the diameter. Is it true? No. The boundary around the coin is the circumference. The diameter is a chord passing through the center of the circle. Okay. 87% students. All of us have different ways of calculating the circumference and diameters. Now we are going to find out how we can measure the circumference and diameter of cylindrical and circular objects accurately. Okay? Before we do that, to the receiving teacher, check to see if the students have brought in the materials that were needed for today's lesson, like the cylindrical objects and the circular objects, plus rulers and strips of paper or any blank paper. Okay? 87 receiving students. This is how we are going to do the activity on how we can measure the circumference and diameter of cylindrical and circular objects. We are going to work in pairs. Okay? Now, before we do that, we are going to draw the table which is on the screen. Now, we're going to draw it down on a piece of paper or in our books, because when we are measuring the circumference and diameter of any circular or cylindrical objects, we are going to record it down. Okay, the column where it says circular and cylindrical objects, the first column, under that, you write down the name of the circular object that you have and the cylindrical object that you have. Is that clear? Like, for example, as for me, I've got a cylindrical object which is the lid of a tin, and a cylindrical object which is the cup, and a circular object which is the lid of the tin. So under the column there, I will put the names of those two objects which I have. So you do the same. Okay? 87 receiving students. You can copy the table down and put it away, and you can sit up straight. We will start on finding the circumference and diameter of the circular and cylindrical objects. Class, all sit up straight. Okay, now, 87 receiving students, this is how we are going to do our activity. As I've said, we are going to work in pairs. Firstly, you are going to follow the demonstration which I am going to show you by following the steps. You use the materials that you have to follow the steps that I am going to go through. All the steps will be on the screen, and I will be demonstrating what the steps are talking about. Is that clear? So you have to follow what I'm doing. So get your materials ready now. Okay? First one. Steps to follow when measuring the circumference of a circular object. Okay, find your circular object. As for me, I've got a thin lid. You find your circular object. Okay? Now, step 1. Are we ready? Put out your circular object. Good. Either a coin or a thin lid, any circular objects. Okay? Step 1. Mark a point on the circumference of the circular object. You can use a marker or a biro and try to put a mark on the circumference of the circular object. Okay? Have you all done that? Okay, good. Okay, step 2. Once you have marked or put a mark on the circumference on the circular object, something like that, the next step is place the circular object beside a ruler with the marking point, with the mark pointing to the scale. So on your table, put out your ruler, and where the mark is on the lid, you place it next to the ruler. And make sure the mark must be pointing to the scale where the 0 is. Like the example on the screen. You can see that. The mark must be pointing to the scale on the ruler, 0. Do we all have that? Yes. Okay. Then, tell your other friend to hold the ruler firmly onto the table, and your other friend will roll the circular object. Step 3 says, roll the circular object along the ruler until the mark returns again to the scale. Make sure that the circular object does not slip. So your other friend will hold the ruler firmly on the table, and your other hand, you move the circular object. You roll it towards your right. As soon as you have finished rolling the coin or the circular object, make sure it must not slip. When the mark returns to the end, you try and get your reading. Okay, step 4, it says measure the circumference in centimeters. So as soon as the mark returns to the scale again, you look at the ruler and get your reading. And your reading should be in centimeters, like the one on the screen. The black mark is there. Have you got the reading? Okay. Eighties and receiving students, that is the circumference of the circular object. How you can measure the circumference of the circular object. Okay? Have you written down the reading in centimeters? Okay, good. Now, let's look at a cylindrical object. As for me, I've got a cup. You get your cylindrical object. Find a strip of paper. Find a strip of paper like this. You should be holding on to your cylindrical object. Find a strip of paper. You place the strip of paper onto the cup or the circular object like this. Okay? Step 1, place the strip of paper on the cylindrical object. So you should place a strip of paper like this on the cup or the cylindrical object. Do we all have that? And then you start wrapping around. The second step says wrap the strip of paper around the cylindrical object. Make sure the edges of the paper does not slip. So you use the strip of paper, you wrap around the cylindrical object like this. And then you bring it back to where it meets. So you will see the meeting point there. Okay? Now, have you all got that? Okay. Step 3, mark a point on the paper where it meets the edge of the paper. You get your biro or pencil and place a mark on the strip of paper where it meets. Okay? All got that? Okay, finally, place the strip of paper beside a ruler with the edge pointing to the scale. Now place your ruler and you place the strip of paper next to the ruler. Make sure the edge, 87 receiving students, the edge of the strip of paper should be next to, pointing down towards the scale 0. And then you find the other mark where you have got where the meeting point is, and you get the reading there. Okay? So you should be doing something like this. On the screen, you have the paper there and the ruler placed on top. And then you measure the circumference. The last step, measure the circumference in centimeters by getting the reading from the mark pointing to the scale. So you look at the mark which you put. Have you got the reading? Okay, very good. Write the reading down. And receiving students, next we are going to find the diameter of the two circular objects. Okay? Again, pick the circular object. Pick up your circular object. And this is how we are going to find the diameter of the circular object. Make sure you place your ruler on the table or desk, and then you find two pieces of paper like this. And then you fold those two pieces of paper in half So you will have papers like this. Step 1 says, place the circular object in between the two papers beside a ruler. So you place these two papers beside the ruler. The first paper should be, the edge should be pointing to where the zero scale is, and the second paper, you place the circular object in the middle, and the second paper should be attached in like this. So you should have something like that. Okay? You place a strip of paper on both sides, and the first strip of paper should be pointing to 0. So this strip of paper, you place it here, and the other one as well. Okay? The first strip of paper should be pointing to the scale 0. The circular object should be in the middle. Now you can get the reading. Make sure the two papers should form a right angle. Okay? They should be forming a right angle at the end, this right angle shape here. Okay? When you place the paper, it should be right angle. Can you see the angle at the edge? Okay. Now you can get your reading. Have you all got your reading? Next, we are going to find the diameter of a cylindrical object. Place the cylindrical object in between the two papers beside a ruler, just similar to what you have done to the circular object. Now, for the cylindrical object, 87 students, look up here. I've got a cup. For the cylindrical object, when we are trying to measure the diameter of the cylindrical objects, we have to be careful because some cylindrical objects, like this cup, the bottom is straight down and flat inside. But other cylindrical objects like this can here, the bottom part of the can is a bit curved inside. So that's the difference between these two cylindrical objects. It is flat underneath, straight down and flat underneath, but for the can, straight down, and there's a gap underneath here, which is a sort of a lamp coming out here. Okay? So there are two ways on how we can measure these two types of cylindrical objects. For the cup or the cylindrical objects which has a flat bottom, we can find the diameter exactly the same way as the circular object by placing the cup straight in between the two papers like this. Okay? Now, but for a cylindrical object like this, it is a bit different now. We won't be placing it down like this, but we'll be slipping the can on the ruler, on the table like this. Can you see that? Okay. What you are going to do is, you're going to use your other friend to help you. The other one, you pick up the first paper, which is pointing to 0. You stand it up and make sure the edge must be pointing to 0, while the other friend, you pick up the other paper and place it closer to the can. Okay? So you should have the paper standing like this and the cylindrical object in the middle. Okay? Try that. The edge of the paper should be pointing down to 0 and the other one on the other side. Okay? Now you can get your reading. Receiving students, if you cannot get a good reading, the next style is you can get a piece of paper, rule a straight line in the middle. Okay? Rule a straight line in the middle, and then straight line in the middle like this, and then you put the paper on the table again. You place the ruler along the straight line. Okay? You put the two papers again onto the paper and you place your can. In the middle, like this. And your other friend can mark the edge of the paper and mark the other side of the paper again. Okay? After that, get your ruler and remove the papers. You measure the 2 points using the ruler, and you get your reading. Okay? Ladies and receiving students, after you have done that, you record your findings on to the table, and you should have the table already filled like this, all the findings of the circumference and the diameter all written down. Ladies and receiving students, you are going to use the table in your next lesson, so please make sure all the findings are recorded in the table. With that, class, our key phrase for today's lesson is on measuring circumference and diameter of circular and cylindrical objects. Thank you very much, 80s and receiving students, for your participation.